John, why don't you step in and have a question? I have to look something up.
Okay.
That's a good question. I like that.
Yeah, I don't know what to say.
Let's just not speak.
Okay, a moment of silence. We'll call it Performance Art Podcast.
Just breathe.
Belardinelli uses multiple mediums to paint, with nail polish featuring as the dominant medium of his art since 1985. Again, let's point out that 1985 is practically a decade before anybody knew what the heck the internet was. He draws and paints daily in large, at-a-glance journals, which I'd like you to talk about, which bear witness to his life. He is exhibited at the Outsider Art Fair since 1995, and here we are at the beginning of the internet, and his work has displayed in the American Visionary Art Museum. In 2001, several of Belardinelli's nail polish paintings were included in the High on Life Transcending Addictions, something we share, show, which was curated by Tom Patterson at AVAM. He has participated in revelations and reflections of American self-taught artists, is exhibited worldwide, but most extensively in Europe and the Americas. He was listed in the Outsider Art Fair 10 Artists to Buy Now in the Daily Beast. He has no formal art training, thank God, but is a graduate of the City University of New York's School of Law. He is an attorney licensed by the State Bar of New Jersey, both state and federal courts, the South and Eastern Federal District Courts of New York State, and the United States Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. He was an organizer of the 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New Jersey Volunteer Lawyers Association, and has been a featured artist in their annual fundraiser. Yeah, this is exciting. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, because I think, as a fellow artist and somebody who's a bit of an art historical buff, I love the trajectory of your career. I love where it started, where it went, how it's going. And I love also that you're self-proclaimed, and really I would classify your work also as genuinely outsider in its themes and aesthetics. So, it's rare to work, to speak, to know, to, cajole with somebody who's, genuinely self-taught and has made it. So that's exciting. I want to get that out there.
Thank you. Yeah. I consider myself in the neo-expressionist. That's what a lot of people put me in that category, even though I'm untrained and I've been showing in the outside world for a long time. But
you know what I find about that, though, that adage or moniker, neo-expressionism, because of Basquiat, and his doc on history, really, I feel like you fold into that because of, the how do I word this? There's a kind of complexity to simplicity, right? You sort of develop your figuration, whether it's in the beast or man, and in how you sort of flatten the planar space, etc. Like, that's very much in a kind of burdened way by history associated with Basquiat, and they associate him with neo-expressionism. But what you don't really, at least in the body of work that I've been able to find, like, I know I've seen extraordinary pieces with color, but I always associate expressionism with color. And you're very monochromatic in a lot of works, in that you sort of like, not graffiti style, but this is something that I wanted to say. I think your work and the origins of what you're doing sort of predates this kind of mimetic culture, and the way you have these sort of like quippy or aphoristic, statements that are painted boldly into your work, sort of like through them, so as not in any way coordinated to be a statement set apart, but a statement within the statement. And that's a precedent for me in your body work, is, in this internet age of the meme, the dominance of the meme. And, what John likes to say, what has destroyed the next generation beyond the millennials bandwidth, that, the source of their attention span is mimetic. And here you are, literally 10 years before the advent of the internet, developing a whole stylistic body of work around what would become known as the meme.
Yeah, I had no idea about that. It was just, it's just like, it's very random.
Well, you didn't have an idea about it, but certainly there was prescience in what you were sensing in the culture. I mean, take us back to the beginning of what became your art.
The beginning starts in the 60s, actually. And it was drawing, and my family owned a restaurant, Manhattan, Savoya, and mafiosos, that type of clientele. And I was intrigued by faces and gestures and things that they would say. And I would just sit at the bar, like 7, 8 years old, and draw these faces, or write down words that I didn't even know what the words meant, but I would write them down and write them over and over and over again. And then they would appear in the drawings. And that's where it started. And I would give these drawings to my grandparents, and they would, I guess they would display them on their refrigerator. And that's my first art show. That's how it started. And then it just developed from there. And it so went in a direction where I had no idea. I didn't have any training. So then we go into the 70s, and started going to, I was 16 or 17 years old. I started going to Studio 54. It was a club in New York, about 1977, 1978. And I met Christopher Makos, and he introduced me to Andy Warhol and Larry Rivers and Antonio Lopez, and all of those guys. And I started hanging around the studios. I have no intentions of being an artist. I'm just, this skateboarder kid that's hanging out at a club. Which I shouldn't have been in. I was very underage, but I learned the business of art in those studios, watching and listening and watching people take telephone calls and, setting up dinner dates. The dinner dates with Andy were commissions. They'd set up dinners so that he would do the covers of the Interview magazine. That's how it was being done. But the most, the one that really had a profound sense on me was Antonio Lopez. He was a very well-known illustrator, and he taught me. He had his partner Juan Ramos. We'd go up there, and then around 2:00 we would walk the streets on 14th Street, Canal Street, just to get the vibe of the city. And he explained to me that watching and hearing and seeing what was going on in the streets, the beat of the street, was important in the art. And that's really where my work, that's what my work's all about.
Yeah, there's something, again, going back to this, the tag neo-expressionism versus outsider art. And I think something about outsider art that always impresses me is an uncanny sense that compositionally a border was never intended. So, and you see that across the board. I mean, all the way back to, Dubuffet and his interest in the works of the insane children. And you see that in children. And I think that's collectively kind of a staple of the outsider art aesthetic, is that the sense that a border isn't part of the intention of the work. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yes, I do. That's just the point that I'm very controversial in the outsider art world, particularly, the Outsider Art Fair is the premier show yearly for outsider. All the big galleries of outsider art come. All the big artists come for the Outsider Art Fair, and there's one in Paris as well. But I have always been a controversial figure in that arena with the writers and with the dealers, because I'm educated, and they made a big deal. They've always made a big deal about the fact that being an outsider artist, they have a very different perception of who an outsider artist should be. They like someone who is in the Appalachia, that it's not exposed to anything. I'm exposed. I've always been exposed to culture, and I'm very aware of what's going on, and that is something they don't like, and that's why I fall into the other category.
What's interesting about that though is like when you look at the standout outsider artists that have been sort of canonized. Mm-hmm. You say they're not exposed to culture, but yet they tend to be myopic within the constraints of a particular culture. Like, for instance, slave, in the days of slavery in the United States, and, the abolition of slavery, and, up through, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and, there's always an artist who sort of positioned himself in the outsider art circles that is immensely associated with a cultural section, if you will. Like, it's not that they're not cultured, but they're cultured by something that's like hyper personal, and it's narrow. The focus is narrow. The topic, the subject matters are narrow. And then they sort of fall into the outsider art aesthetic.
Yeah, I had an experience with someone at the Outsider Art Fair. I don't remember her name, but she's what's the proper word now to use? But she lived in an institution, and she was a Mongoloid, and she made sculptures in the institution. She would find garbage, and she would find yarn, and she would make these giant balls. They were enormous, and they'd be colorful, beautiful. And they were selling them for $25,000. And they sold a lot of them. And she ran up to me and she wanted me to buy one. And I've always felt that when you sell something for over $10,000, it changes you. And she was very aware of what the monetary value of what she was making was. And it changes how you go about making your work. And, so I've always had this position. It's controversial that, the outsider, that whole tag it's a tag. That's really what it is. It's to fit you into a category.
Right.
And, and I don't like that.
The reason you don't have more of an association with the street art is that you didn't come from the street art.
I did. I was a graffiti artist in the 70s. Yeah, I was running around with the skateboard crew, like Zephyr and all those guys, and Don D. And we were tagging. I wasn't on that level with Zephyr. I mean, Zephyr really took off, and it was that's what he was doing. But he was a skateboarder at first.
Right.
We all were skateboarding, and that's how we all started. Man, I remember seeing Gene in the park at Washington Square Park. He was basically playing Frisbee. He wasn't doing art at that time. He was just a guy hanging out playing Frisbee with us.
That's interesting. How do you see, let's position Basquiat in this. And I know Basquiat's a controversial figure for you, just sort of like in your personal politics because of your life experience in that scene. So break that down for me, because I think this is important to the difference between being labeled an outsider artist versus being sort of this canonized neo-expressionist. And I know you see yourself probably more as a neo-expressionist, right?
A modern contemporary neo-expressionist, that category.
You see what?
As in the modern contemporary world.
Right, as a neo-expressionist.
Yes.
Right. So, but you feel like you've been tagged an outsider artist. So let's look at through your lens. Let's look at that scene at the time and how what evolved out of it. Sort of, you got pushed into outsider art, even though you and a lot of the people within that group of artists were doing in sort of radically producing works that were, as significant as controversial as what Basquiat was doing at the time, but somehow he's defined what the neo-expressionist movement is.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you break that down?
I think Basquiat was an outside artist. He really was. I mean, he and his influences were William Hawkins, Bill Traylor. Those are the people that influenced him. And at that time, yeah, he used graffiti as his platform. That's where it started with him. And it was his timing. This is 1979, 1980. I'm talking. That's the period. This is where everything was in play. I wasn't painting at that point like that. I wasn't doing what I'm doing now. I wasn't doing that. I was in school, but I was still drawing. And but again, these he fell into the right hands with Andy and a couple other people who helped him. And that could have been anyone. It could have been anyone at that time. There were others. There were many others.
Something kind of metaphorically, there's an equivalence for me with Studio 54 and the kind of the birth of the superstar persona. And I think he had the charm. I mean, you see it in every bit of.
He wasn't a part of that. He wasn't a part of Studio 54.
No,
he wasn't in that
part
world.
Of Studio 54. My point is that, when you think about Studio 54, the legend of the bouncer with the clipboard that's assessing your look and letting you in whether or not you are fabulous, and that the kind of birth of the superstar in art kind of happens in the early 80s, and Basquiat's kind of the poster boy for the super charming kind of like outsider sexy. And I feel like he was just picked up and put in that situation, because of his intangibles.
Yes.
His physical.
Well, two things.
His persona.
You also have Wall Street just took off. It was crazy. People were making money left and right. And there was a lot of money to buy art. And you also had Rene Ricard. Rene got behind his work, and he wrote that article in Art Forum. And that's what really put him on the map.
Mm-hmm.
Having writers, excuse me.
Sorry, what was the studio, the gallerist? Was it Betsy
John? No, Anna Nakai was the one who first represented him.
Right, and where he painted in her basement, correct?
No, that was Anna. It was on Prince Street.
Yeah. And so if you think about the amount of effort that people put into launching that career, I mean, there's how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of talented people have never had that support.
You're right. I mean, it's just, it's like I said earlier, it's random. It's a very random thing. It's luck. There's a lot, there's not much to it. I mean, you have to have some talent. I mean, I like his work. I mean, I don't love his work. I mean, if you really want to get into the work that I love William Hawkins. I love that work. I love Bill Traylor, primitive, simple. Larry Rivers. Yeah. I even like Schnabel's work.
I like his early work. I'm a big
the plates and all those things. I mean, but it's the 80s, everything was in play. The Wall Street thing was a big deal because people had money to burn, and they were just buying art, and they were buying a lot of it.
What's fascinating? You bring up Bill Traylor, and I mean, going back to what I was saying before about the outsider artist who's deeply rooted in a cultural moment in time, and the significance of the work playing out in sort of. So he's positioned to transform the future of what is now a historical perspective. And I think that's what is fascinating about really the outsider artists that are the most deeply rooted in situational crises, right? It's to me, it seems like outsider artists oftentimes are those artists who are like vibing in the deepest part of a crisis in a historical moment, I don't know if you feel that way about outsider art, but I've always noticed that, well, especially outside of the mental hospital, right? So the mental hospital is still fascinating because you're steeped in the situation of their mental health crisis. And
Yeah, I agree with that. That yes. I went through a period I went through a very hardcore, I should have been in a mental hospital at that period, 3 years, let's just say. And during those 3 years, I didn't paint. I stopped. I didn't want to paint. But the one thing I did do was draw in those journals every day. Because I have these journals for 30, 35 years. They're giant journals that I draw or paint in. But that was the one consistent thing that I did. And I was drawing how I was feeling and how I was thinking and how I was tortured and the turmoil. And I had shown this to a doctor that I was dealing with. And she said, you need to make a book of these. You need to have a book made of this, of this period of time. And I am now. I mean, I'm making a book and it's titled We All Fall Down. And it's a compilation of the drawings and paintings that I made in those journals in those 3 years. And so you're getting back to your point about the institutional art that's being made in institutions. Yeah, that is the purest, the raw work, authentic, because it's coming from the mind and the heart. You're not painting for an audience there.
You're not painting for an audience, and
no,
I think that's what I mean. One of my most dear artists to me is Dubuffet.
Mine too. I really like his work.
And what he did, I mean, just his journey, to bring kind of organic primitivism into the spotlight. You know what I'm saying? I think primitive is the wrong word.
Yes.
A kind of primordial sense within the art as an unfiltered, perhaps uneducated, perhaps, not motivated by cultural influence, but almost automatic, raw, sensual, guttural. It's every influence is a stimulation, psychic stimulation, as opposed to, right, a rendering of something outside. It's I love rendering is internal.
It is.
So.
Yeah. He's the one who coined the term art brut, and that's where they get outsider art from. That's where this whole thing starts, from him.
Yeah, but how they folded, like Americana and, regional, like the regionalisms, you know what I mean? Like you said earlier, Appalachia, somebody living on a mountaintop in a shack, with no teeth and a foot long beard, and, or, even somebody like Trailer, who's, isn't even really discovered until what? He was like in his 60s or 70s.
I don't even think he had any notoriety until he was dead. He was, he had that man that owned the funeral home who gave him pencils and paper and he stayed in the back of the funeral home, and he was giving him he was giving the funeral owner the drawings. That's really how.
Never read that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's basically what was happening with him. And then there are others. Henry Darger, who he was a recluse who was living in in an apartment building. He worked as a janitor, and he created a world of art. And he never showed anyone. And then he dies, and then his landlord, cleans out the apartment, and he finds thousands of drawings that he made. And now you can't touch one of those drawings for less than $50,000-$60,000.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about the artist that you helped discover, Robert, was it Prudhomme?
His name is Robert Sunholm.
Oh, Sunholm.
And
thank you.
Yeah, I discovered his work. He was a janitor. And actually, when I went to see his work at his apartment, I felt as though I had walked in on a modern day Henry Darger, but he wasn't. He was more exposed than Henry Darger. And the thing about him was that he was, he had a very interesting background. he was a prostitute when he was a kid, around 13 years old, lived in a home. He was not educated. And I felt an affinity towards him. I had a father that was gay who died of AIDS when he was 52. So I wanted to help this guy. I really wanted to help him. And I did. I put him on the map. I got him into the Outsider show. He was selling his work for $10. I got his work up to thousands of dollars. And, we had a great relationship. And then he turned on me, and he felt as though he got a taste of what fame felt like, and he couldn't handle it. And people were getting into his head, and he just completely turned on me. And then the relationship soured. And we also had a film being made about him, and screenplays were written. We had people that were very interested in developing this story. And there still is actually interest in this story, but Robert Sondheim is no longer in my life.
Well, I mean, at least you brought him out, which is important. And even if that relationship soured, I think the world needs to expose as many, as many portfolios like his as possible. I mean,
I agree. I still love his work.
Yeah.
I still love his work. I don't like what he did, but I still love his work.
And, I'm slowly going to steer this conversation toward the NFT art market. But all of this sort of backstory is important to the conversation I want to have in a little bit. Yeah. So going back to the your coming out as an artist, in the mid 80s is when you really start to come out, or is it like around 85?
Yeah, in the 80s. It starts with someone saw some of my work in the journal drawings, and I got a show, and they asked me if you make paintings like that. I said, yeah, I can. I did. We sold the show out, and then boom, it started. That's how it started, and it started. Still doing the drawings in the journals. Those are the blueprints. That will never stop. That's a daily thing, and those are the the blueprints of my larger work. That's how I make the larger paintings.
Now I know.
So that's when it starts. 80s, sometime in the mid 80s.
So I'm very much about artists bearing witness. Like for me, the idea of what is meaningful art is attending to time and place. Now we've talked about the idea of being situationally outside of modern contemporary societal reality, if you're imprisoned or if you're institutionalized, but you're still bearing witness to a psychological state. You're saying you use the term bear witness a lot, and I love that about you and about your work. So when you talk about bearing witness in your daily journal, are you bearing witness to the world around you as much as the world within you? Where is that sort of, what's the line there that you would say you work around?
Well, everything is in play in those journals. Everything and anything comes into, whatever's inside my mind gets put down into those journals. There's a term in law. It's an exception to the hearsay rule. There's like 23 exceptions to the hearsay rule. One is an excited utterance, and the other is a present sense impression. So a present sense impression would be something like, we're walking in the street and we see a car run a stop sign, and a person's walking across the street, and I say, oh my God, look, that car is going to hit that person. That is the present sense impression. It's happening right at the time. So the veracity of what I'm saying is true. So the things that are going into the journals are present sense impressions and excited utterances. It's like a machine gun. It's coming at you right away. It's immediate. They're going down. There's no time to think about it. It's a mark, and it's marked, and it's done. And I never change it. I never correct it. It is, if it doesn't look right, it stays that way.
Well, and which is interesting, because also, I think a defining difference between, and again, I know you are aligning yourself with neo-expressionism, but outsider artists and the rest is present sense impression, or excited utterance and that lack of editing.
Yes.
Editing is not something that's really associated with outsider art, right?
Yes, it's true.
So
Well, I think, I mean, I know some outsider artists, current that I'm friendly with. I know that they touch up, they do, there's editing in a lot of their work. I've never liked doing that. Even on the big paintings, if I make mistakes and there's drip or whatever, and the shapes are off, and it is what it is. That's the way it stays.
And I think that's important. And what it makes me think of is, have you heard, the idea of diaristic, right? That the work is diaristic in the sense that its value is so personal that editing is not required, because every mark in the field is diaristic. It's
true.
Sentiently your mark.
It's meant to be. That's why it's a meant to be mark. I mean, if you go back and edit it, it's an art. It's artificial now, in my opinion.
I totally agree, and I would say that, in my own life's work, that's true, especially pre-NFT digital. The analog works, the paintings, the metalworks and whatnot, were, especially with the metalworks, there's no editing is not even really quite possible, because 50% of the work is adding up through oxidation and sort of external influences, natural influences, or organic influences that I don't so much as control as guide. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can stop them, but I can't so much control them in the middle of the process.
Well, the whole oxidation thing is, that's really, because you have no control of it.
No, and that's me getting over to nature. I personally like that lack of control and having an honest relationship with sort of like myself in nature, like that I am not in nature, but of nature. Pollock's famous, "I am nature, damn it," to the reporter.
Yeah.
I kind of feel that way too. And there's something about your work and how it's diaristic, and that you allow for the chaos to unfold. And to be honest, to have a relationship with the sort of chaos of the self, editing is not important, right? Because if you allow for sort of like, the strange attracting moment in chaos theory, where something arises out of the fray of chaos into a moment of stability, like that's the mark, right? But you have to give sort of allegiance to the loss of control in that flow of chaos. And that's the mind. To me, I'm identifying with your work as, being very much comfortable with the chaos of daily living.
Yeah, well, do you surf by any chance?
I have never, no.
When you surf and you catch a wave, you have no control. You have some control, but the wave is in control. And you're just going with it. You're not, you can't, your ride is your ride. And if you get taken under, you have to just go with it. And if you don't go with it, there are a lot of things could happen. And painting is like that. It's like a bullfight.
This is great. Now these metaphors are adding up. You have a bullfight, you have a wave. There's a term that comes to mind in German, which, the German language is fantastic for, these isolate words that account for, the most, specific of human experiences. And one of them is that I love is called Einfall. And Einfall, it refers really in art making across all spectrums, music, dance, writing, poetry, fiction, painting, sculpture. That idea of, imagine you're like falling into the void, la vide. It's letting go and falling. And is by that falling that you are able to achieve a momentum in a realm of sort of like interaction with reality, conscious, unconscious, everything experiential. It's by that falling, but by letting go without having any concern of whether or not you will be caught.
Exactly. That's what I mean about the wave.
What?
That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happens in the wave.
Yes, and in German, that term is Einfall. And there's not really enough, I can't think of any other word in any language at the moment that applies to what we're talking about more.
I've never heard about that. I've never heard that word before.
You have to look up the term Einfall. There's actually,
I will.
There's another, it's always typically in tandem with the word Untergang. So there's Untergang, Einfall, and Untergang is kind of more about the being in stasis prior to a moment of letting go. So like, if you think about, a mind state, you're standing in the water and you're looking at that field of energy that is the waves piling on top of each other. And you are contemplative and you're sort of, what's going to happen sort of unconsciously, consciously. And that's Untergang, the moment before Einfall. And Einfall is the moment that you reach the letting go into the wave and to go where that wave takes you and to not have any concern for the outcome, except to be in the process.
Yeah, I've never heard of these words, but I'll definitely look them up. They may make it into the journal today.
Weekend, delving into like iconic German terms for human experience. It's a fascinating journey. It's a rabbit hole. I'm telling you, you may not come back.
I don't want that to happen again.
So you said something, and I read in your magazine article. I can't think of which article it was. Maybe I don't know. Anyway, you had said something fascinating, which was if Michelangelo was trying to sell his work in today's art market, he would be struggling. Elaborate on that. And I agree with you, but I want you to elaborate.
You it's you have to have a team behind you that's really behind you, believing in you, giving, and that brings that gives you confidence. But I know a lot of really talented, incredibly talented artists. They don't have dealers. They don't have shows. They have no ability to show their work. So it's a very difficult situation to be an artist. You have to get unless you're going to sell your work online, it's very difficult. But that's what I meant. I mean, so here is someone who's super talented, and that doesn't mean that you get into you get into a gallery and you get your work on a wall or into these fairs. It's a lot. I can't explain how that happens. I mean, it's like look. Let's just use Robert Sunholm. This is a man that was a janitor, and I walk into his life, and the next thing you know, he's in the Outside Art Fair. It's the connections that you make in life that get you into the galleries and get you into the shows. That's what it's all about. It's really like that's what happened with Basquiat. I mean, he fell into the hands of Andy. Andy is the one who opened the door for him.
For sure. So
that's what I meant about that. I mean, it's a tough world to be in. If you're an artist.
Let me segue now into NFT. And I'm sure you can see why. So, I've told this story, I think, in a past episode of the podcast. My first experience of a solo show, much to your point, came by a series of happenstance and good fortune and the will of other people to bring me to bear. I had been collected through Facebook very inexpensively by a chocolatier who had a shop in Paris, and she was buying that she would see on my Facebook page, and I would sell them for $50, $100 and ship them off to Paris. And one day she asked me to produce a book of various works. She actually curated the book because she wanted to buy it. I rare editioned it, sold all 25, but she ended up buying about 5 of them. And out of the blue, maybe 6 months later, I get a message from this chocolatier saying that she was at the annual photography exhibition at the not Center Pompidou, but the great what's the great, geez, I can't think of it, the great center where the annual photography exhibition is held in Paris. Do you know?
No, not offhand.
Anyway, there was a gentleman walking around at this fair. They ended up at the same booth with this collector of mine, and they were looking at a Marlon Brando photograph, and she was going to buy it. He was going to buy it. That struck a conversation. He turned out to be a film producer who was the nephew of Andre Breton, and had many, like 327 films to his name. She says, "I know this American artist. You might be interested in looking at him. He is kind of a hybrid artist. He paints in his process, but finishes with a camera." So he was interested. They sat down for lunch. She showed him the work. The next thing you know, I have a solo show in Paris in 4 months, and I got to get everything off the ground. And I mean, I'm poor. I was then, not so much now, but I was then. I had to raise the money to put on a show in Paris. Cost me almost $25,000 because with photographic output, as you have to put, everything has to be printed, monoprint, giclée, it's expensive. You have to frame it, you have to ship it. And by the time it was hung on the wall, I had spent damn near $25,000. This is to have one solo show for a month. And then I have to go to Paris, which cost me, part of that 25,000 was to attend the opening, basically. And when all was said and done, I think I sold maybe 35,000, barely got out of there with anything, had a time of my life, but still in the contracts where anything that wasn't sold, the gallerist and at the time, the art dealer, which was Jean-Serge Breton was his name, the film producer. Not sure if he's still alive because he was in his 70s then. But they both had option to purchase the work that didn't sell for $200 a piece. I mean, we're talking works listed on the wall for, $1,000 to $3,000, and they had the option. This was my first solo show. I had absolutely no chops in the business. I had no idea what I was doing. So I said, yeah, sure. I signed my life away. Just get me on the wall in Paris. I'm coming. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Next thing you know, there's out of 65 works that were hung, I think there were 22 that sold. So what? And I came back with no work. None.
Yeah, but you know what? You that $25,000 bought you that story that you just told me.
And I would give it up for the world. But in the transition to my conversation about NFT, in response to that about Michelangelo and Robert Sunholm and those, all of those talented artists that that can't get a show, that there is a market now. That is.
Yeah, I know. I'm finding out about this, and it's I don't know much about it, but I'm interested in it. But I'm interested in it for a completely different form of art that I make that I would like to be involved with NFTs. Yeah,
well, so I had to transition by necessity because my analog career was not purely digital, and I wanted to segue into a purely digital format to explore. The interesting thing about digital, Daniel, is that it's so fast. I mean, if you have any skill with Photoshop, or some, Illustrator or some digital platform, you can, because it's so much is algorithmically built by the software, that your decision-making process speeds up exponentially. It's like, here you are, you're mainlining your brain, through algorithmic software programs, and your decisions that you would make in the analog world are happening at a vastly faster pace. So
it's interesting.
It's phenomenal because the whole thing in digital is layering, right? So let's say you have 3 artworks from your analog career. You can take those 3 artworks, you can select sections from those 3 artworks, you can build them one into the other, right? And then you can, there's a million ways from Sunday that you can sort of stratify the aesthetic. And in a matter of an hour, you've produced a work that is going to be in many ways probably more gripping to you aesthetically initially, because it's so novel, because the outcome is so crisp and it's photographic in its detail, right? And that's why. So I'm working on a project and we're going to talk about this offline, but I want to invite you as an artist to join this project that I'm working on with a local university. It's a pilot program because of your history with mental health and drug addiction and your sense and sensibility around psychic states. And I've read in a lot of the language that's built into your works, a lot of real intelligence around human psychology, that you sort of predated the meme in your work, I think is brilliant. And I know it happened accidentally. Well, nothing happens as an accident, but I know it happened without your considering that you were being mimetic. But now the meme is the world. And, that's where you were. The ability for me to produce work. So I'm working with prompts from clients and that are brought to me through their therapists, through educators, counselors, psychologists, and producing a visual equivalency to a psychic state as narratively described by the client. And for me to keep up with the workload, because we're building a catalog, we're hoping to bring this catalog into an app that would then become a tool, both at the collegiate level and in practice, where they would be able to utilize an art catalog or a visualization catalog of lived experiences through art as prompts to start dialogues in practice with clients. And I think you'd be a great contributor to the project. So
it's similar to what my book is about.
I know that's what made me think of it to pick it up right now. I was because of the book that you brought up.
Yeah. I'd be very interested in that.
Yeah. And it's good.
Definitely.
It's getting off the ground very quickly. So we'll talk about that. But tell me more about your interest in the NFT. What is, so let me just say to the world who's listening, when this episode airs, Daniel is not now an NFT artist. And as you all know, I am now an NFT artist. I have been talking to Daniel for several weeks and maybe even several months about his possible entry to the space as somebody with great integrity and legacy and contribution to the art world. That is what the NFT space needs. It needs more of that OG, traditional analog artists coming over and bringing that integrity. So tell me about your interest and about perhaps maybe something about the idea you have for a project that you'll bring to the NFT world.
Well, for me, I'm a novice. I'm just, and I like being a novice with things because it's like, how I began as an artist, not knowing what I'm doing. And this is a whole new world that's opening up and I'd like to be in it. And, I'm sure I'll be fumbling in it like I fumbled in my career as an art, my career, my actual career. So that's, and also, talking to you've, when I met you explained to me, and it was really difficult to speak that night because we were having, we were at a dinner and it was hard to hear, but you were telling me about this and it's intriguing to me. So, it's a big giant question mark for me. I don't know much about it and I want to get into it. The art that I would like to use in NFT is something called row art. And row art is a form of art that I created around my Aunt Ro. It's her face. And I've been doing it since the 80s. I used to make these little pieces of art on postcards, and I would hand paint them, and then I would send them in the mail to people, and people started collecting them. And I've never had a Row Art show, but people have. You need to have a show of this. This is, and it's a very intense story as to why I created the Row Art. There's a whole history behind why I created this form of art, and that's what I would like to. I would like to use Row Art in my introduction into NFT. That's the art I would start with.
I might ask you, because I think, I will certainly help advocate your entrance to the market. I would like you to put into this document so that you could use it as a kind of marketing for, your entry into the market. Tell us a little bit about that history of why Ro, why her, what was it about her?
Okay, so yeah, so it's a psychological thing with Ro. She's the sister of my father, and so what Ro Art. This is how Ro Art. This is the day Ro Art came into existence. My father was dying. He was on oxygen, 24/7, and he was smoking crack while he was on oxygen, and he blew his house up while smoking crack on oxygen, and he was thrown through a window. And so the house wasn't just a little fire. It was a bomb. It was as if it looked like Lebanon or Beirut when I went to that house. And the house was co-owned by Ro and my father. And it was Christmas Day. And so I got a phone call from the police department telling me that I had to come to secure the premises. And initially, I didn't really want to go because I just said, "Is the man alive?" And they said he was. And so when I went, the house was completely destroyed. There was nothing was there. Floors, ceiling, roofs, everything was gone. So I just figured, my father was dead. There was no way he would be able to survive this. So, and I remember there was a cat, and he had a cat there. And I made the decision to take the cat to this place called the North Shore Animal Shelter to save it. And then I went to see my father. And this is before cell phones. This is like in 1987, I'd say. So I get to the hospital. I said, there was a man that was in a fire or explosion. They said he was over there. He's alive. So then I called Ro. And Ro was a very crass, just crass is the word I would say. She was a person that would be on The Sopranos. I mean, she was that type of a character. So I called Ro on the phone. I had to call collect. It was Christmas, so I sort of disrupted her Christmas to tell her, I'm at the house, and I just saw the house, and it's gone. It's completely destroyed. And she freaked out. She went ballistic. And I said to her, everything that was inside that house is gone. It's either been burned or melted. And she said, quote unquote, "What about my fucking camcorder?" Not, "How's my brother? How's your father?" And that instant, Ro Art was created. I went home and I used the same face. There's a photograph that was taken of Ro, and I took that face and I collaged it into a piece that I made. And then I just became obsessed with making these pieces and depicting Ro in all different types of scenarios. And I've made thousands of them.
Do you have copies of them, Daniel?
Excuse me?
Did you have copy? You said you send them to people, but at one point you said you're thinking about putting a book together, a collection of them. So do you have copies of them before you mail them out?
I have the originals. I would make copies of them and hand paint them and then mail them to people. And it was a form of art. It was Ro Art, and it was also mail art. And there are people that have them still, that quite a bit of them, and they frame them. But so what happens now is that then the computer comes, and so then instead of making them by hand, collaging them, I then started photoshopping them. So it's easier for me to send them via the computer to people, and I still do that today. I'm still doing that.
Who do you send them to?
Friends, collectors, whoever. I mean,
How about podcasters?
I could. Yeah, they're very, very, they're shocking. They're punches in your face. They have text in them, and that story I just told you, how it came into existence. I have a man named Marvin Goldstein who's been following my work for forever. He's a Cooper Union guy, and he's 91 years old. He writes about me. Of all the work that I make, raw art is the form of art that he is so into, and he has been on my back to have a show, and to have that story I just told you on the wall, and then the images all around of the raw art. I just haven't done it yet. I haven't found the right gallery to do this, but I intend to do it one day. And Ro passed away, and I used to send them to Ro, and Ro used to be angry that I was using this particular photo, her face, because she didn't like the photo of herself in the that I was using. And it's the same face all the time.
Are they on your Instagram?
No, but I can send you some, and you can see them. They're very simple, very primitive, very simple, and
please do.
Yeah.
Let me segue here around that, just so you probably don't know much about the NFT market, but what you just described is in this sort of like infancy of the market. What has been most successful are these various variations on a theme collections. So collectability in the NFT market really started around what was called the Crypto Kitty, the Cypherpunk, Bored Ape. There's a company called Lava Labs, and what they really did was they used AI, algorithmic software programs, to produce the collections by randomly selecting variations on the theme from a pool of details that could be added to the Cypherpunk or to the Bored Ape or to, whatever was the subject matter. And they would produce, they would announce, this is, going back 5-6 years to the early origins of the NFT market. They would produce we're going to do 10,000 variations on a theme. And it's really not them doing it, it's the AI. But so what ended up happening was the AI would produce, say one particular face with blonde hair is a detail, a mustache is a detail, a particular type of sunglasses. And these are minimally pixelated. So I don't know if it's 24, 32, or 64 pixels total. So you get this sort of pixelated image of what is the subject matter, cypherpunk, let's say. And there's a pool of 250 details. And the AI randomly selects the details, produces, spits out the cypherpunk, and it becomes, serialized. And so if you have, in certain of these serialized collectibles are rarer than others because they can tell you, they have whole charts that break down what the AI produced, and say out of 10,000 cypherpunks, because that's how many were produced total, only 19 of them had alien skin. So, recently, one of those cypherpunks that was, produced by the AI, of the 19 out of 10,000 that had alien skin, auctioned off for, I want to say it was $1.4 million because of its rarity. Okay, all that I say only because right now the NFT market is ripe for variations on the theme, which, again, we've talked about this in previous episodes. This all goes back to Andy Warhol. And the pop art sort of revolution galvanized around variations on the theme. Whether you're talking about Jim Dine or, it doesn't matter who you're talking about. Every one of the pop artists were very much interested in variations on a theme because of the replication possibilities of screen printing in particular. So that being said, you're right. This collection, which is a far and away more sophisticated, complex, personalized, art historically significant than what, in my opinion, what is happening now in the NFT space, yet you're still in line with the dominant theme, which is variations. So
yes, the face, that face can be, the variation of that face can be distorted, and I've done that with it by hand.
Well, and now you're going to have fun with it. I mean, you could even, like I said, you bring it into Photoshop and start algorithmically messing around with it in a matter of, you can produce 10,000 row editions, set yourself up to compete with the cypherpunks.
It's funny. I did one. Actually, just someone asked me to make this, and I just made a giant one. I don't know. There were probably about 80 row faces it's the same face over, just over and over and over again. And I titled it "Face It." That was the title of the piece, "Face It." And so someone said to me, "Oh my God, I love this. Can you do this on canvas?" So I just silk screened it on canvas and hand painted her hair blonde.
Brilliant.
And that was the piece.
Pop sensibility. That is. And
yeah, total pop art. Yeah, it was definitely pop art influence.
Yeah, the NFT market is dominated by pop sensibility. And so I think that's part of its immaturity, that it's sort of closely linked right now to, the most salable, the most accessible, most universally sort of infiltrated in daily normative culture, I would say, is the pop sensibility, right? So yeah, that's where we're at. And also, interestingly, the NFT market comes out of the cypherpunks, which is what this nod is, in the art. The cypherpunks were sort of rogue cryptologists that, beginning in the late 70s, started to try to envision a sort of a anonymous financial platform, right? A way of taking the power away from institutions and the apparatus of government with regards to taxation, transfer of money, in line with black market sensibilities, basically like fuck the government, pardon my French, but really that's what the cypher were all about. They were really radical. And this is happening around the same time as the punk music revolution, Studio 54. I mean, this is right after Studio 54, the pop art revolution. All this is happening. And so you can see these sort of shared roots in the sensibility of what was happening at the time. And, here we are, almost 50 years later. I mean, it took till 2011, John, for Bitcoin to launch.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some failed exercises in decentralized currency prior to that. But Bitcoin and its grip on the world started in 2011. The seeds.
Yeah, I got one in 2012. I got two in 12 from a collector of mine who told me to buy them. I should have bought a lot more than two, but I bought two.
Be a billionaire.
I'm not. Well, I could have bought. They were cheap when I bought them.
I know.
And I just didn't know anything about it. Just like I don't know anything about NFTs, and I don't want to make the same mistake I did. I'm grateful I own two, but this collector is a distressed equities trader, and he's very aware of what's going on. And he said, "You need to buy this. Just put some, buy a couple $1,000s worth of this." I didn't. I just bought two.
but still, that's a great story.
Yeah, it's a great story. I think that he bought a lot of it. He's now retired, and he races Formula Ones as a hobby.
The chances are he bought more than two.
I think so. I think he did.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, if I could go back in time, I would have, 2011, June, I think it was June 16th or something. It was in the summer of 2011 that Bitcoin launched, and its opening price was 8 cents. Think about that.
I paid a little bit more than 8 cents. It was a little bit more, but it wasn't much more.
Yeah. Think about that. If you had spent $1,000, if you had spent $100, you would
I know. Don't tell me. Don't remind me of that. I mean,
you'd be almost a billionaire today if you spent $1,000.
Well, I didn't. I mean, but I'm in the game. I have to.
Well, so let me tell you another little story, just to inspire you to jump on board with me here in the NFT world, and perhaps you could be a somewhat regular guest here as your journey unfolds, and we can then start to really discuss the market from multiple perspectives, mine and yours, and John's. And John is also a great collector of mine, and I'm sure he would be interested in learning more about how to. I mean, I would say he's going to wait until you're in the NFT market, but that's something to consider also. But let me just give you some perspective. Well, actually, let me start with a question. And be honest, okay? I don't care how much you sell your work for, but as an artist in the analog art world, I'll tell you my own personal experience. Over the course of, let's say, the previous 15 years, I probably sold 100 works. All right, through gallery. Very difficult process selling artwork through gallery without a lot of hype and being one of the chosen, right? Though being the lucky one.
There's also a big commission. There's a 50% commission on whatever you sell as well.
So my number is, I say out there 100. What would you say over the last 15 years through gallery? And if it's 1,000, so be it. But how many would you say you sold?
How many pieces of work?
Yeah, just paint you sold through gallery. It's important to me. It's a round number. You don't have to know specifics.
A lot. I mean,
hundreds, 500,
at least.
Okay, so 500. Let's just call it 500. I mean, you want to call it 800? Want to call it 1,000? What is it?
Yeah, 1,000. Say.
Fantastic, and you've had a great career. That's 1,000 paintings that you've sold over the last.
I mean, they sold out the show in Copenhagen. I heard that I think there's 16. I think they sold 14 Friday night.
Perfect. So now you're at, let's call it 516, and that's over the last 15 years, give or take 500. It doesn't really matter, but that's over 15 years, right?
Right. Yeah.
So relative to your reputation, your market that you already have developed, and that market will follow you to the NFT space in general.
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I started my NFT journey in 4 months ago. I have sold far in excess of 100 works.
Amazing.
In 3 to 4 months at very good prices, considering what the market is right now, being in its infancy, and collectors all being basically speculators, and not very many of them being art historical buffs, and not really being able to read the work for what it actually is and what it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I have sold more in 3 months than I did in 15 years in the analog market.
That's incredible.
So now just look at your own, trend over the last 15 years, bringing your collector base to the market, which is going to be healthy for the market, because once your collector base comes in for you, they're going to start shopping around for other work that they like. And that's what the market is lacking right now, is the integrity of the analog collectorship that hasn't come in yet, because the analog market artists haven't come in yet. There's very few analog market artists that have transitioned over right now. I mean, I'm going to tell you, if it's less than 1%. So
well, you're going to have to speak to me about this after we do this interview. We'll talk more about this and how I get into this. I mean, this is,
I can have you in a day. So, I mean, are you in New York right now?
Excuse me?
Are you in New York City right now? Where are you staying right now?
I'm in New Jersey at the moment. I'm recovering. I have a home in New Jersey, and I'm recovering there.
Okay.
My studio is in New York.
Okay. Well, so maybe, I mean, I don't know if you're up for it, but maybe I could drive up there for a day or two and just really help you get involved.
Yeah, I think that's I would need that, because that's how I learn. I need to have someone show me.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that after the show.
Yeah.
John,
Yeah.
you have anything you want to follow up on here?
Oh, there's lots, but running out of time. I guess one thing I'm interested in, in earlier on in the interview, we were kind of talking about those German words, Einfall, letting it go, and it seemed like I don't know you that well, Daniel, but do you think destiny plays a big part of being a successful artist? Or we were talking about Michelangelo and how needing a big team behind you, and some other artists that it was just luck that they were discovered and became popular. I'm just wondering where you are now with your art career. Do you think it can be forced, or is just up to uncontrollable things, how someone becomes?
A combination of things. It's when I said Michelangelo, that quote, he'd have a hard time selling his work today. Michelangelo had the Vatican behind him. That was a big force.
Mm-hmm.
So he was he's a super talented artist, but he had the Vatican behind him. That's huge. So I've had a lot of dealers behind me. I have a lot of big dealers helping me and guiding my career. Great. I've had a lot of bad dealers too. I've had a lot of corrupt dealers working with me. I've had a lot of dealers that I didn't like, that we just didn't get along, but did sell a lot of work, but still we didn't get along. So when you mean destiny, what do you mean by destiny?
Well, it just sounds like some of the artists you mentioned, it wasn't really within their control that they became famous. It was just who they met, who they hung out with, who discovered them. And no matter how hard they tried, if they hadn't met the right people, they never would have been well known.
I agree with that. Yeah. It's not. I'll tell you. This is an interesting story. So, I have a dealer. She's from Connecticut. Her name is Beverly. She had an actress by the name of Sarah Jessica Parker come by to buy some work, and she bought a nail polish painting of mine. And this is, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. Anyway, so Sarah Jessica Parker was involved in a show. She was a producer on a show called The Next Great Artist. It was a cable show. And she said, oh my God, Beverly told her about me. And she said, oh my God, he would be perfect for this show, to be on this show. So Beverly calls me and tells me this. And so I said, yeah, okay. So it's great that she bought the painting. And so they want you to come tomorrow to White Columns. It's a gallery in New York. And they want to meet you, and they want to put you on tape, and they want you to be on this show. That's what she tells me. So I said, okay. So I go. I get to White Columns, and there had to be 2,000 people there. The line was going blocks of people. They're there to show their work, to be picked to be on this show. So I was with my wife. I said, I get to the door and I say, I think it's like a guest list. There's a man with a clipboard, like what you described earlier with the man at the door. There's a man at the door, and I go up to the man. I get up there. I said, I think I'm on the list. I'm on the, who are you? I give him, and he says, no, there's no list. You have to get on the line. So I said to my wife, I said, I'm not getting on this line. I'm not doing it. I mean, this is crazy, right?
Yeah.
It was a beautiful day. She said, no, go get on the line. So I did. I got on the line. There are people there with MFAs. There are people there that were, I'm some of the people in front of me and behind me, I could see their work. It was off the charts, amazing. Sculptors, painters, graphic art, you name it. Amazing artists. But they weren't just doing this in New York. They were doing it in LA and Miami on that same day. And they were going to pick people. They were going to pick 3 people from New York, 3 people from Miami, and 3 people from, I think, Chicago. I think it was. Anyway, so they have these people at different stations. You present your work, and they make a decision whether you're going to go to the next level. So, I see these people with these incredible portfolios, and they brought pieces of their art. Amazing. The only thing I had with me, I had an LL bean bag with one of my journals. I think I had my 2015 journal with me. That's it. Present the journal to the man. It was a full journal. He's looking at it, and he's looking up at me, and he said, what is this? I said, I draw and I paint in these every day. I have 25, 30 years of these. And he just says, okay, stay here. He sends me to the next level. Man sees it again. Anyway, make a long story short, I'm inside. Now I'm inside. There's a panel of people, and they're very well-known judges. I can't remember their names. I know the art critic for the New York Times was there, Jerry. I forget his last, Jerry something, whatever. He's there. 5 other people are there. Sarah's there. Sarah Jessica Parker's there. I'm before them now. Now they're gonna question me as to, you know, who I am, what I'm about, and what is this work that I have. And then Sarah Jessica Parker says to me, "Oh, you're here. I love that painting. The painting I bought." I was like, and I said, "Oh yeah." She goes, and then she says to me, I said, I didn't realize that I had to wait this long. I thought I was on the guest, there was like a list. And she says, "Honey, this is in Studio 54. and it broke the ice. We all started laughing. So they questioned me, and, they're asking me about my why I'm making this work, kind of work what category I'm in, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, "Yes, you're a New York finalist. You're going through." And, okay. Fine, great. So now I have to make a 5-minute film of myself, and it can't be 4 and it can't be 6. It has to be 5. And they love it. Now it's between me and another person in New York, the 2 New York people. And I make the mistake of, they ask me what I need to make my work, because I'm going to be sent to I'm going to be sequestered for at least 3 months in an unknown location, living with other people. And we're all going to be on a show where we are weekly told we're going to be given a topic of a project that we're going to be making. And we have to produce this project, a piece of art. And so they want to know now what I need to make my work. Okay, I need nail polish. I need a copy machine. I need house paint. And I need music. I need really good music with me. So, but the mistake I made was I was away at the time. I had an assistant at the time. I had him compile every color nail polish that I needed. There had to be 5,000 colors so I listed each one that I needed. And I think that was why I wasn't picked.
Mm. They
chose the other person. And I really, after I watched the show, I realized I doubt I would have been able to survive one project, because these were art student kids, and I would have been the oldest one on the show as well. I think there was another woman that was a little bit older than me, but I would never be able to produce work under the gun like that, because it was basically an art school setting. And the person who won had an MFA from, I don't know, some school in Chicago or something. I mean, but it was an interesting experience and story now to talk about. So
yeah, it's fascinating. You never know. You never know what's going to
happen.
happen.
You never know. So that's what I mean by you never know. And again, that happened because of a collector that a dealer that I have that knew her, that put me into this situation. I mean, so connections.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. I want to talk more, but I think we better wrap it up.
Okay.
I hope to hear from you again. I hope you get into the NFT market. I think.
Yeah, yes, I'm definitely eager to get into this. So, and I'm going to learn more from Henry.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. And yeah, this is a wrap. I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay, Henry.
Thank you, Daniel.
You're welcome.
Okay. Talk to you later, Daniel. Bye.